Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Goal Intentions. It's Shamira Busby, and I am simply on a bit of a giddy feel, particularly after talking to Anthony Wilson last week. He just brought it. It was a mix of fashion, a mix of finance, just overall friendship. And it was one of those experiences that I seem to cherish more and more each day as time passes. And the more I'm able to connect with people, it seems as if, there's just this joy, this delight that comes with, holding on to something really special. And the special thing that we have in common is community, is the place where we can start off and figure out how our lives are going to be and transform. And I'm not going to say that all of my friendships have been amazing. They've not. Some even evolved, where there are some people that I absolutely could not agree with, didn't seem to like their personalities, and vice versa, because I'm not for everyone, and it sure is on the other side as well. However, as we seem to have matured over time, we realize that in life, all the things that we've gone through over the years doesn't necessarily dictate where we are in the present moment. And so far, the people that I've been in communication with and that you've seen on this platform have all been amazing to me. We've all been really good with each other. And it just shows how we've managed to heighten our awareness and our value, and understand that, in the end, we really need each other. We need to lean on each other oftentimes, and particularly when we're in a state of affairs where life seems so challenging. It is wonderful to every now and again, pick up the phone or use social media in the most positive way and connect with someone as best as possible. Today, I feel as if I'm just in cute heaven because I've known our guest today for a long time. She's a longtime friend, another one, right? And it's just to show how we would cross paths, separate, but yet manage to come together in a way that is just so magical and share stories. And, I just feel so honored for everyone that come on here. But honestly, today I am really gleeful to have our guest, Carla McGregor. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Shamira. Oh my goodness, your gleefulness is contagious. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is such a pleasure. It's been so long. You are a long, long time friend. I probably knew you, you're a freshman at Wingate High School, and we shared a class together. And I can't quite remember which class it was. I do remember it was science, because I felt this sense of competitiveness with you at that time. You were and still are very smart. And like Will Bogle, like this head to toe kind of thing. I just felt like I needed to show up because you were showing up in class. And not only that, you had the most exquisite posture that I could remember. You weren't, outlandish. You weren't, very outspoken at the time, but you carried yourself with such poise. That's what I remember back in high school. How did you feel back then?
It's funny that you should say that about my posture because as you say the word posture, I hear my grandmother in my ear, like, okay, stand up straight, sit up straight. That's where that came from. My grandma just always was like, walk like you have books on your head. But in terms of high school, oh my goodness. I felt like I was in my own world.
Oh,
I felt like, like we all were in our own little bubble and every now and then interact with each other, but at the helm of it all was what we were dealing with and what we were carrying, right? In high
mm-hmm.
school, like you said, I was quiet. I kept to myself. I spoke to people, like you and some others, but it was kind of like, all right, I have to do this because it's ingrained in us what we have to do, especially as Caribbean people. Like, your parents are like, I said they go to school for do this, this, this. So it's just like,
Mhm.
it's constantly like, it's just like my parents and my grandparents are constantly playing in my head in high school. Like, all right, I can't veer this path and I can't veer this path because this is what I'm here to do.
Right.
So that's pretty much how high school felt for me. Like, all right, I got to get this done.
It was like we were on a mission for sure. And you know, I don't remember you outside of studying. So exactly what was it like your experience just, being at Wingate? Was it that you were really book oriented or how did you manage to balance your time back then?
So I don't think I was so book oriented. I had the goal to do what I had to do education wise. Um, but after school, I had other responsibilities I had to help with. So like I always had to go pick up my brother from my younger brother. So I wasn't staying around. But in between all that, I found time to build friendships. And, one of my dear friends, Lamisha, who I knew since elementary school, and we ended up um, going to different middle schools and finding our way back. As you mentioned before, you just kind of, it takes you this way, life takes you this way. And sometimes you find your way back again. And Lamisha and I were friends, and we were like, I don't know if you remember, we rode to school with Mr. Hines. And I think
Mm.
people identified us like the two girls who came to school with Mr. Hines. And I think some people thought we were his daughter. Um, and I was and we thought we were fancy because I believe Mr. Hines had a gold legend at the
Uh-huh.
time.
Yes,
And we
yes,
thought we were so fancy coming to school in this gold legend.
yes.
But right outside of school, it was like I had my core friends that we hung out with, and Lamisha's family, I was very close to them. Like I was at their house and it's like that. And you remember Michelle Polius,
Yes.
like after school, I was at her house sometimes. So I wasn't so much into books as it appeared. Like I did my work, as you guys know. But many of the other activities that you and others were in, the drama club and all these things, I didn't partake in because it was just I had other things I had to take care of family wise.
Mhm.
So that was high school.
And you talked about having, a Caribbean background. Tell us a bit about your upbringing and exactly how did that manage to shape your life as a teenager? And I understand responsibility. Unfortunately, I don't have siblings on my mother's side. So I grew up as an only child pretty much all my life, right?
Mhm.
So, it was a little different where my responsibility was to just do what I had to do, but then also work because I needed to get things to support myself and live with my grandmother who was asleep in, home health aid at the time. So, I wonder exactly how was that family dynamic and your culture, how did that manage to meld to help to get you through the times of going through the responsibilities and maintaining that in high school?
So I don't know about other people, but I feel like a lot of times in life, I'm looking back and saying, um, oh, that's what was happening. Like when I was in the moment, I didn't realize all the things that were. But as we grow through life and we look back. So I'm from Jamaica, born and raised. I came to New York when I was 9. So when I was in Jamaica, I guess I was a upper middle class person, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, my parents were entrepreneurs, they had businesses. And then my mother came to the United States, right? We came together, but my father didn't, right? So my mom migrated. And then when I was in Jamaica, I mostly stayed and was more in contact with my father's side of the family. I don't know how
mm,
many people know this, but I'm biracial. My dad is white.
mm,
So we were like white people in Jamaica, right?
mm,
So, and then I migrate to New York and I'm more with my mother's side of the family, right? So both of my grandmothers were wonderful and dynamic women, and I credit them with who I am today. Like pieces of them are entirely who I am. So my father's mother is this wildly non-traditional white woman who
mhm,
like does all these non-traditional things, but at the core of her, she was very spiritual. She was very spiritual. In most Caribbean cultures, it's popular people to church like every Sunday, and you kind of like hold on to some type of faith. I can't name a faith that my grandmother held on to, but what I do know is we prayed every day, every
Mm.
single day.
Hmm.
And whenever she got in the car to go somewhere, she prayed. Like she prayed, and when we came back, she prayed again, a thankful prayer. Thank you for taking us safely. And pieces of that, like my spirituality is built from pieces of that. And then time lapse jump to New York now, and my mother's mother, my grandmother, is spiritual in a very different way. She
Hmm.
goes to church. She is a Christian. She's a devout Christian, and then I start to go to church every Sunday, and then I get pieces of her type of spirituality, and I meld them together to be who I am today, and with all the other experiences. And then in high school, I was living here. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we lived with my mom, right? So now she's a single mom living in a new country, and we all have to pull together. So some of my responsibilities, I had to pick up my little brother after school. So I was kind of like, and what I speak to is I look back, like it wasn't a problem for me. I didn't feel like it prevented me from doing anything. But now as an adult and I look back, I'm like, okay, maybe it did prevent me from participating. Maybe if I didn't have that responsibility, maybe I would have taken part in some extracurricular things at school. Right. But one thing that I did participate in school was that I don't know what the formal name of it, but it was like a work study program. And many of
Hmm.
us were the careers in healthcare program, I think it was called. Right.
Yes, yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
then,
It was a
yeah,
co-op work study kind of thing.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. And I worked at Kingsborough Psychiatric Facility.
Okay.
So that was a good experience. I met wonderful people there who helped to navigate me into a profession in healthcare. Well, it started in healthcare. I'm now
Mhm.
in education, but still the same profession.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, the road that I traveled is sprinkled with bits and pieces of all the people I met along the way.
That's really refreshing to hear. And quite frankly, I enjoy when folks come on here and I learn something new about them. I had no idea that you were biracial. I just remember you wearing, in one of the photos that you have up, you rocked a St. Croix shirt. And in that moment, I said, wait a minute, she went to St. Croix as a little girl. She has my heart. That is my place of birth. Like, did you go to St. Croix?
No, to date I've still never been to St. Croix. But that particular shirt was given to me by my uncle's wife at the time, who was Crucian. Well, she grew up in St. Croix. She was born in St. Lucia, but
Okay.
she claimed St. Croix. So and I'm looking at the shirt in my head. It's like a fuchsia shirt, and I think it says like "loving you every day is easy" or something like that. St. Croix, right? Yeah. So and this is what I'm telling you. It's sprinkled with bits and pieces of people I've met along the way. My uncle's first wife was from St. Croix.
Oh my gosh. So it's like, okay, I feel as if we're like this connection because I'm like, she's wearing proudly my place of birth. So I wonder if she went, and I meant to ask you, I never asked you, but then also really understanding how cultures can come together and create such magic, right? So I know for a lot of families and a lot of my friends, that has been the case where for me, I was like, well, I don't have siblings to pick up after school. I can do all these things. But I did have friends who were like, well, no, Busby, I gotta go. My mother is coming home at 6 o'clock. So I need to make sure my brother is taken care of and my sister's taken care of, that they have, their the sunny juice from set out on the table with a beef patty and cocoa bread, so make
The
sure that they
sunny
have something to
delight.
eat after school, right? That was the life. So I used to gain pleasure in going with my friends, to get the beef patty and cocoa bread, the authentic beef patty and cocoa bread, not
Hmm.
that gimmick stuff that they sell in these days. The nice fluffy crust and the bread that's so nice and doughy and
Don't
oh,
get me started on how you can't get that good cocoa bread anymore.
like, I don't know what happened. Like, what the heck? Why? Who changed the recipe and who gave
I
you
don't
permission to do
know.
that? It's
We got to go
ridiculous.
to Jamaica to get it right.
If somebody can bring the authentic one, that'll be wonderful. Yeah, but just going back and thinking about the responsibilities back then, they were kind of heavy for a number of people to actually take on.
Yeah.
And for your brothers, are you guys close?
We are. We are. My older brother, if people follow me on social media, they probably see him. My older brother is a chef. So,
Ah,
right. So he's into private catering now, but he's worked in a whole plethora of restaurants with fancy names that we know now as household names. But back then, I didn't know who they were. Gordon Ramsay and the guy who owns the place in Harlem. Well, he owns a lot of places. The Swedish Ethiopian guy.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
His name will come to me. And my younger brother, who I, had to pick up and watch. We're close. We're close.
Awesome. So,
So,
thank you for sharing that piece, because I know that can resonate for a lot of children even today, who it's a little different today where, we ask our kids to pick up a little responsibility and it's the end of the world. Whereas back then we had to do it because there was no choice but to do the chores and to help out with wherever you can, right?
right.
But post high school, where did you end up?
Where did I end up? So I'll start the story at the end of high school. And there was a college fair. There was a college fair, and my mom's sister, my aunt, is a nurse. And as a kid, I looked up to her, and I was certain I wanted to be a nurse. And then once I learned that nursing involves blood, I was just like, wait, no, I don't like that. So sorry, that's not for me. So I spoke to my aunt, and she was just like, if I wasn't a nurse, I would have been a dietitian.
Mm.
So that's it. I was just like, okay, I'm going to be a dietitian. And at Wingate, I'm walking around the college fair trying to find a school that has a dietitian program, and not many of them did. And one of the reps said to me, why do you want to be a dietitian? And I was just like, I don't really know. And she said to me, there is a book called The Occupational Outlook Handbook.
Yes.
And this book has, all the professions, their projected growth, their salary, their requirements. I suggest that you take a look at that book. And I go to the library and I get that book and I open and I'm looking through professions. And I've never heard of occupational therapy before.
Mm-hmm.
I heard of physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't want to do that physical therapy. I've heard of that. That's common. I'm going to choose the one that's, no one ever heard of. So,
Right.
and just for that reason, just because it was just like unheard of, I said, okay, that's it. And I went on to do a volunteer work at Brookdale Hospital in their occupational therapy department. And I met a man, Eves. May he rest in peace. He recently passed away. And he guided me, encouraged me. And at the time, there were only 3 schools in New York City that offered an occupational therapy program. It was Columbia University, NYU, and York College. And I say New York City because my mother was like, you are not going away to college. And I was just like, I want to go away. And in good Caribbean way, she was just like, you want to go and say you can't have boy and all these things? No. I'm like, boys? What? I'm not even looking at boys. Anyway, so I chose York College because it was way cheaper than Columbia and NYU.
Indeed.
So at the time, York College was, I believe it's still very competitive program to get into for the same reason. It is way cheaper than its counterparts. Now there's a few other choices, but at the time, the program was primarily Jewish. And the student population were primarily Jewish. And it was really hard to get into the program. And there was a rumor that the program director, who was a Black woman, I didn't know her very well at the time. The only thing that I knew about her, that she was very difficult. And the interviewing process for getting into the program, it was random who you got interviewed by. So guess who I got interviewed by? the
The
very
very said
fierce
woman.
director of the program. And I was just like, that's it. I'm not getting in. It's the end of the world for me now. And I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm an occupational therapist today. So I got in, and I later learned a lot about this woman. And I learned that she is a pioneer in our field. And so I am an occupational therapist. And in our field, only 5% of occupational therapists are Black. So I don't have the data on how much of that percentage is Black women,
Mm-hmm.
but the profession of occupational therapy is mostly women. So it's probably maybe like, if I had to guess, 4.5% Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I end up after high school going to York. I went directly. I didn't take a break. It was a 5-year program because there's a year internship.
Mm-hmm.
And I interned at Creedmoor Psychiatric Hospital, Manhattan Psychiatric Hospital, Harlem Hospital was one of my interns. I fell in love with Harlem, and Harlem fell in love with me. And I got offered a position in Harlem, and I didn't take it because I was scared.
Oh.
I didn't take it at first because I was scared that they offered me the position right after school, and I had not yet sat for my state boards.
Mm.
So because you're allowed to practice for a short time between the time you graduate and you sit for your state board certification. And I was
Mm-hmm.
scared that if I accept this job and then I fail my state board, it'll be very embarrassing to go
Mm.
back to work. So,
Mm.
I've heard other people speak about how fear gets in the way, but I spoke to a few people and they were like, no, don't let that stop you. You're going to pass up a great opportunity. And I ended up taking the job. And then I took my state boards. I passed. I'm a registered occupational therapist to practice in New York. I spent 11 and a half years at Harlem Hospital
Mm-hmm.
in their rehab department. And I never thought that I would leave Harlem and start over somewhere else.
Mm.
Um, I started to create a path for myself, the path that I thought I was going to take. I was like, I'm going to stay here. I was also the fieldwork coordinator. Um, I was the liaison between the universities. I was building relationships. And I thought that after I finished my career in rehab, I was going to pivot into education and teach on the college level. That was my plan.
Right.
So, and then I got married. I had children. And I was just like, wow, these hours are long and I need to put more time into parenting. So it's like,
So
cool, 9 to 5 and teaching and
it's a lot.
this, it's a lot. And then I said, the Department of Education, wow, they have shorter hours and they have summers off. Oh, but I'm not a pediatric therapist. When
Mm.
I worked at the hospital, I did have experience in pediatrics because in the hospital, we did rotations.
Mm-hmm.
So we did uh, inpatient unit, outpatient unit, pediatrics. So each therapist worked and had experience in all, but pediatric was not my strength. I didn't think it was my strength. And again, I was just like, I don't know. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. I don't know. I had a good friend who was already in the DOE. She's like, just give it a try. I applied to the DOE and I got accepted again. And I feel like the universe always puts you where you need to be when you need to be there.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I remember my interview, and again, there was lots of people. You could have been interviewed by a lot of people. Most of the people in the profession are white. I was interviewed by the only Black man in the room. I
Mm.
don't think any of these things are ever like accidental. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like they're always intentional on the universe's part. And
Absolutely.
I ended up not taking the job after all that
Oh my
because I
goodness.
found out I was pregnant with Carter, my son, my
Oh
second child.
my. Oh my.
And I felt like I didn't want to start this new venture also dealing with the new venture of pregnancy and a second child. If you
Mm-hmm.
listen to my stories, you'll sense a theme where I'm always ready to jump out and stay in my safe spot. I'm always ready to be like, oh, okay, I know here and I'm going to stay here because it's safe here. And I
Yeah.
ended up declining the position and staying at the hospital for another year until after I gave birth. And then I ended up reapplying to the DOE. And that is my current place of employment. I'm a school based pediatric occupational therapist within the Department of Education. And I love it.
It's such a trajectory, to think about, being in a position where you're thinking about what you want to do, not sure if that's what you want to do, but following the lead of what our parents and family members are saying is the best thing to do. Because when I was at Wingate, the thing was to be a rad tech, a gynecologist, something in the medical field, because with Caribbean culture, like African cultures, there's this whole notion that if you become a doctor, you have arrived. You have given me all the brownie points I need as a parent if you show up and get these credentials so that in my tribe, I can show off. They didn't think about the hard work that went into all of that because most of the time, our parents at the time did not even have, formal education. I know for my grandmother, she's, I mean, very smart woman, ran businesses just as your parents and your family have done. I would consider myself to be in the middle class back in the Caribbean as well. But then, she, I think, only went up to the fifth, sixth, seventh grade. That was her education. And beyond that, she's just worked, her entire life and continue to work so that she can fend for herself, right? And here we are, is like we're figuring out all these wonderful things to make our parents proud, but is it really what we want to do?
Right.
So hearing how you've managed to find your way, it's really what I'd like to emphasize to young people, because there's this whole thing and some parents are like, you got to do this and pushing children to do a particular thing, but it's not the desire. So just having that bit of expansion, and fortunately you had someone to really be honest with you, that level of transparency to say, hey, explore this text. And that text is actually phenomenal, the occupational handbook. It gives you every single profession that exists. It gives you the salary range. It also gives you all the tasks that are needed for that specific job. And that's my go-to for my resume preparation and getting people prepared for the workforce. That has been my Bible over the years. I even have one that's probably old and needs to be updated, but now it's online. So you could click
Right.
online and get the handbook information to help steer you and understand exactly what it is that you can, one, title on your resume in the most clear way, but then also having a deeper understanding of what occupation actually matches your skill set so that you don't find yourself trapped, right?
Right.
So for those who aren't sure about what occupational therapy entails, give us a little day in the life of what you do and everyone else who managed to work with the population. How do you provide a level of care?
So, occupational therapy is a great profession and it's great in so many different ways. One of the ways is that it is it has so many factors and areas that you can go. Like I mentioned before, that I worked in a hospital and I interned in psychiatric hospitals. And now I'm in the Department of Education. I also worked in early intervention in the NICU. So you can pivot in OT almost anywhere. So currently I am in the Department of Education and my role is to be support to students for IEPs, which is a document that outlines how a student who needs something other than the traditional set of education, how they learn best.
Mm-hmm.
So my role is usually supporting students who may have issues such as fine motor issues. They have a weakness or deficit in the fingers that causes them not to be able to hold their pencil correctly, causes them not to be able to form letters correctly, which as a result prevents them from fully accessing the curriculum and the education.
Mm.
Um, In addition to other things, students with visual perceptual difficulties, which is basically the integration of what your eyes see, which your brain records, and you throw in a motor aspect of how the body responds. A lot of our children now, we're seeing delays. They're so delayed in their development, and it's affecting their education. And because of all these multifaceted reasons, it's going unnoticed.
Mm.
It's going unnoticed at first in the home because maybe parents are busy working. Maybe parents, maybe it's the first child and they don't know what norm looks like. And then on top of all these other potentials, we've had this pandemic, right? So the children are spending a lot of time on screens. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone says screen time is bad, screen time is bad, screen time is bad. But in everything, there's pros and cons.
Right.
But these children have so much screen time. And I'm telling you firsthand what we're seeing. I'm seeing children in second grade not knowing ABCs.
Mm.
And I'm not talking isolated 1 and 2 students. I'm seeing lots of students.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing students who developmentally, it's normal for younger children to reverse letters. Anyone who's worked with children, parents will see little kids when they're learning to write B's and D's, they mix them up.
Yeah.
Developmentally, that's normal up until maybe age 8. We're
Mm-hmm.
seeing this continuing. We are seeing children mixing up U's and N's, M's and W's. And a lot of it, I'm not saying screens are the only reason, but a lot of it is because the children are on screens a lot and they're spending time on screens. They're not outside. They're not
Mm-hmm.
playing. They're not doing the things that foster normal development. They're not throwing balls across their body. These things signal to the brain which side is your right side, which side is your left side. And like I could go down a whole neural pathway, which I won't bore you guys with.
No,
But
this is exciting, honestly, because I find that more and more as schools develop ways to transform, in a sense, educationally, the things that are really important are neglected. For instance, gym. Gym for us, and I'll speak from high school. I know for even if I were to go back to junior high school, I remember having to, and I went to junior high school back in St. Croix, and it was about learning the theory and the history of a sport. So we spent like maybe a week physically writing and researching through the encyclopedia about specific sports. And we had to memorize whatever it is that we needed to learn about who originated the sport and, who were the major players and whatnot. And until we mastered that aspect of it, then we were able to have fun. So for every sport that, Jim offered, we had the opportunity to learn its history. And once we mastered that in the phys ed teacher's eyes, we would then move on to playing the activity. So I played flag football, basketball, all sorts of sports in junior high school. And then even having to transition to New York and go to Wingate, we had 8 gyms that would needed to be fulfilled, right? And for each gym opportunity, you had the choice of being extremely physical.
I remember having dance. I remember
Right.
having dance class at
Dance
Wingate.
class. We had step class. Volleyball was my thing. I mean, the opportunities were endless, right? And now there's a major shift where gym is being decreased or has become like an independent study, if you will.
Right, right.
And then the after school curricular activities aren't even as physical as they used to be. And to get our children into those types of activities, we have to pay a lot of money for it.
Right.
So I wonder what the priority truly is in terms of the development of a child if they're not well-rounded in the sense of really understanding physical that would lead to brain activity to help them really navigate, throughout the education system. Even with band class, I had band class. I played the clarinet and the bass clarinet. And for me, with the counting, that helped me to improve my math, believe it or not, because I got into rhythm, you know. And anything I hear has like a doop, doop, doop. I make music out of it. Even if it's a horn honking and it's consistent, it's annoying. But after a while, I start to do like a little calypso with it, because I'm like, yeah, let's do this until this shit ends, right?
Right. Right.
So how do you think about, with all that you're seeing, what are your recommendations?
And this is the thing. As you mentioned, all these things. I remember at Wingate having a class. It was an art class, but it was commercial art. And I remember one of the things we had to do, we had to design a logo for a make-believe company. And the skills involved in something like that, you're writing, you're drawing, you're perceptualizing, you're visualizing, all those things are out the window. And then I think people don't realize how important underlying skills are. And I think even parents want the best for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the kid, is two, what they're giving them a book to read because they want them. We live in a competitive world,
Yeah.
and you want the best for your child. You want your child to be ahead of the game, right? And you want your child to be the first day of school in kindergarten or pre-K, and you already want them to know all the letters and the sight words and the this and the that and the that. And I think it doesn't come from a bad place. It doesn't come from neglect or anything in this case. It just comes from our world is moving so fast and we're neglecting the underlying foundation.
Mm.
And that's since I've been in the board of ed, it's something that I'm noticing. And it's something that I've started to carve out like, well, what can I do? What can
Mm-hmm.
I do? And then it becomes where, okay, for example, now the children are delayed academically. They're not reaching their benchmarks. And because of the pandemic, and everyone is just like, oh my goodness, they have to get catch up. What do? Give them more work to do, right? They're building on top of a weak foundation.
Yeah.
And it's it's a weird place because how far can you go back to build a foundation? But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't do it, you're forever going to struggle, right? You
Yeah.
can't build a house on top of a weak foundation. Like you'll be fixing something every day. And it's the same thing with our children. Like they're trying to build on top of no foundation. And the poor children keep falling apart. They're stressed out. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying. They want
Mm-hmm.
to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm one of those weird people who don't really think that there's bad children. I feel like they're just looking for something that they can't get.
Right.
Right. And it gets manifest in different ways because of all these factors. I feel like if we just take one child and start with that one child and try to rebuild their foundation, what skill is that they're missing to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do what's required of them?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for each child or each person that looks different, right? We just have to identify what is their foundation and let's try to rebuild that foundation. And one of the biggest things for me is play. Like children need to play and be active. Like get out of the house, put the PlayStation down, put the Xbox down. Can we play tag? Can we go back to some of these old school?
Yeah.
My children are always, something's always trending on social media, on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
It's always trending. And the stuff that's trending, I'm like, wait, that's the stuff from back in my days. And of course, now our children call us
Exactly.
old. They're like, oh, that was the 90s. How was it like back then? And I'm like, watch it.
Right.
But I'm I'm like, okay, we can bring back the clothes from the 90s, baggy clothes, and all these things are trending again. And we can bring back the music from the 90s. Can we bring back the games? Can we
Yes.
play double dutch? Can we play
Yes.
Skelly? Like, can
Yes.
we do hopscotch?
Yep.
I feel, yeah. So I'm actually working on carving out a program for parents to um, to get them to understand these things. And I know that there are so many factors. I know some of our parents don't live in safe neighborhoods, that they don't want to go outside to play. And I know some of our parents, they have to go to work. They don't have time to take their kids. And there's this situation, and I know. But if we can even try to do 1%, it's a start. And then we move and we try to do 2%. We have to try to start somewhere. So, and I feel like at the foundation, our parents are a foundation, and we educate the parents and we start a domino effect. That's the only way to save our children. That's just how I feel.
That is really, important. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And when I really think back at, even for my children, I know a few weeks ago I talked about, with Aria needing to have an IEP for speech, right? And that has done wonders for her to the point where at this point, I don't even think she really needs it, but I still have her go through therapy just so that she can strengthen and read. I mean, to the point where she's so masterful at this point that she came third place in her school for the Black History Month speech. And, Carmelisha, my oldest, when she heard her recite it, and it was a long speech. It was the Malcolm X speech, actually. And, when she heard her, she says, Arya, did you memorize all of that? I never saw Arya memorize it. I didn't see her doing it at all. But clearly, she carved out the time when she was in her bubble and memorized the entire speech word for word with action so that she can be eloquent in the way how she delivered a speech that seemed really complex and long, having to come from Malcolm X. Because that was a speech from conviction, right?
Right.
And here you are, a 9-year-old managed to take that on and, from the help of speech therapy, be able to articulate, enunciate the words in a way that it's very clear. I would have never thought that because when she was younger, it was like a little mumbo jumbo. And it was like, maybe she has a lisp or maybe she has this. And it was beyond that. And then when I think about Adonis, handwriting is horrible. Oh my goodness. It's terrible, right? So one would say, yeah, you're going to be a doctor one day. But then come to find out that, and I guess this comes with your profession. A teacher told me that perhaps he has to exercise his hand a bit more with a
Maybe.
squeeze ball.
Right.
And that was like, I think in the fourth or third grade when it was just so illegible, to read Adonis's script, and still is, but he's improved if he takes his time. But she said, you might want to consider just have him squeeze the ball because there might be some motor skills, some fine motor skills in his hands that
Maybe.
is not allowing him to strengthen the way how he would manage to form his letters. And I'm guessing all of this, now that you're talking about it, really coincides with what you do and what
Yeah.
you're seeing in the school system with children not having access
Yep.
to those basic foundational teachings. Because I know handwriting was a thing that we had to learn. That was a subject growing up.
Right. There's no more handwriting. There is no more.
Penmanship.
Right. As much as we hated it, right? Our writing was such, and it it worked. We drew pictures, we colored, all those things. We didn't understand that. Now, as a profession who I spent years studying, like which muscle contracts to hold a pencil, now I understand. But when we were done, we were just having fun. We were coloring.
Yeah.
Right. But that was strengthening the finger muscles. That was strengthening the eye brain connection, how to stay in the line, like all these skills. And now children don't draw pictures anymore and they don't color anymore. They color on an iPad. They use their finger and they color on an iPad. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Hence, the screen time, what you're talking about, is not so much even playing the games and strengthening the thumb, because I'm sure
Right.
thumbs should have
Right.
muscles and all with the
Yeah,
game,
pretty strong
right?
thumbs.
But you're absolutely, now that you're talking about it, I truly understand, because you take these things for granted, as simple as
Right.
coloring. You're so
Right.
right. Because I also remember having to do uh paper mache back
Right.
then. That was
Right.
a form of art, where you took the Elmer's glue or whatever white glue it was, and you put it in water, you mix that concoction up, and then you take paper, dip it in there, let it get soaked, and start to create your formation balls. We made planets and stuff. This is
Right.
back home in St. Croix, where resources were supposed to be limited. I mean, these are the creative things that we were doing in junior high
Right.
school and elementary school. And you're right, it's missing.
It
It's
is.
missing.
It
Darnice has a question. She says, she's asking, if the parents have a weak foundation, how can they offer the care and support to their children?
And that's why I feel like we have to educate and build the parents' foundation too, because that's how it is. It's this bad cycle. It's this bad cycle. So we have to offer the parents. So I sent home, I had, along with one of my colleagues, sent home a handout, if you will. And maybe to someone else, it may sound simple. It said things like, when your child is doing homework, make sure the TV is off. Someone might say that's common sense, but some people just really don't understand that some children children with disabilities, children with processing disorders cannot screen it out. Like, I may be able to sit here and have a conversation with you, and there might be something going on over there, and my brain can cut it off and not attend to it.
Mhm.
Many of our children can't. They're like trying to find out what it is. So a
Mm.
simple thing like educating parents on give your children a quiet space to do work.
Mhm.
Give your children a specific time to do homework. When I was young, my mom said, "Go do your homework," and I did my homework. Nowadays, you need to tell your child, okay, we get home from school at 3. We're going to have a snack. All right, I want you can breathe a little bit, take a little breather. At 4 o'clock, you're going to start homework. Children need structure. A lot of our parents don't understand that they need to offer structure, especially for children with delays, disabilities, children on the spectrum, children with ADHD. They need structure. You can't just leave it up to them. Go do your homework, go take a shower. They need a schedule. And these are the little things that we need to teach the parents to help to build their foundation, right? And so we had sent home a handout explaining the importance of these things and also explaining play ideas that they can do with their children to strengthen their hands. So if anyone ever walks into my room at work, they just think I'm having a good old time playing with kids. And the children think they're playing too. But my underlying skills as an occupational therapist is what drives it. So my children think they're just bouncing on a ball. We're working on core strength. We're working on balance. Why do you need core strength and balance in school? You'll see children laying on their desk, uh, just laying on the desk. Their core is weak because they're not outside playing. So now they have to sit up and pay attention to their teacher all day. They're tired. Um, you'll walk into my room and see me playing with Play-Doh. Oh, they're having a good time. Why is this kid playing with Play-Doh in school? We are building hand strength. We're isolating finger movements. We're imagining. A lot of our children lack imagination and creativity. I give a lot of my students Play-Doh and they make a ball. They make a ball. It's kind of like, where's their imagination? I think because they're just staring at screens. They're not outside experiencing. They're not seeing a bird. They're not seeing an airplane. They're they're just lost. So it's up to us to guide them. It's up to us to show them, hey, okay, let's make a person. Let's make two balls. We'll make one for the head and we'll make two more for the eyes. Okay, oh, what if we roll it this way and we can make arms? Things like this. And these are the little skills that sometimes um, I have to remind myself that may seem commonplace to other people, that we need to remind our parents that remember what the things that you did as a child, you need to teach your children explicitly those same things. So these are just some of the foundations that we need to provide our parents with, in addition to, maybe speaking with them and helping them to understand what other struggles they are and referring them to other services. Because my service as an occupational therapist can't fix everything. So, but I may be able to refer them to someone else who needs something else.
I'm just blown away of the information that you're actually pouring in for all the goal intention viewers. It's just, it really helps to understand where there's a deficit in our systems. Because when I think about some of employees from a workforce perspective, there are some people who come in and they don't have the basic, as we say, common sense to really do work or simpler tasks. And it's as if we have to do an entire now Zoom training to get someone on board to type a letter,
Right.
a simple letter on how you would ask someone, to meet with you for an orientation, crafting not an email message, a letter with the salutations, dear. I mean, all these things seem to be missing and remissed by people who are growing up in a different type of culture. And I'm really saddened by it because it all stems from the education system. Yes, we have to give parents control and hold them accountable for certain things. But in the same vein, it's as if there needs to be a partnership because there are parents who don't know how to. And in our era, our parents didn't know how to either,
Right.
but they were so determined to make sure that we figured it out because they learned from the school of hard knocks. And they said, well, if I gone through this, then you're gonna have to figure it out and go through that, as long as you're respectful, right?
Right.
So we figured it out. Um, your message today is very powerful and makes me really, really think about how to even structure programming that would allow for children and adults alike to get what is necessary to truly thrive.
Uh, it really is. And I mean, I spoke about children, but you mentioned adults. Daily, I see adults who are lacking so much skills, and I'm just like, ooh, this horse is really far through the gate. And especially as a culture, Black people, Afro-Caribbean people, we are ashamed a lot. We're
Mm,
afraid to tell people that we have a problem with something. We're afraid to ask for help because we don't want to seem less than. We don't want to be like, well, I really don't know how to structure this email, but if I ask this lady who just hired me, she's going to think I'm crazy. Okay, I understand. But ask your friend, ask your sister, ask Google. We're just like, and then once you start knowing, then you can be like, okay, at least I'm here, and then someone can help me get to the next step.
mhm.
But yeah, we have a lot to unpack and to correct as a culture. And I think one of the things we need to let go is the fear of asking for help. Fear of asking for help and
Pride.
judgment, right? Pride.
Pride.
Pride. Yeah. So, a lot of times I'll speak, even as a parent, my children, they argue, and I'm telling, okay, all right, you argued, you got your emotions out. What's the solution? What can we do to fix it now? Now we know it's a problem. Okay. He did that. She did that. Now, what are we going to do forward?
Mhm, mhm.
Like, I've really moved into this way of solution-based thinking. What can we do about it? We could talk about it. We could argue about it. We could cry about it. But what are we going to do about it? And we know finding solutions are hard, but just start somewhere. Start somewhere.
You definitely got to start somewhere. And, hence this platform, in all honesty. I don't know everything, and I'm still trying to learn how to navigate these systems and, make it attractive and interesting for people to tune in. But in all honesty, if I had not reached out to a community of people to really understand the scope, I probably would have been stuck on Zoom doing, although I go to Zoom, no bashing Zoom. I go back to Zoom every now and again. But then, just being forward thinking and figuring out what will be user friendly and easeful for people, you have to understand that communication helps to build.
Right. Right.
Community builds.
Right.
So just to go back to talk about weak foundation, you need community to
I agree.
help lay it out.
I agree. I
When
agree.
I think about back home, our houses are on our platforms, but they're cisterns. I don't know if it's in Jamaica, it's equally like that. At the bottom of the house, it's like they dig a deep well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the well is filled with to catch rainwater. We call it cisterns back home.
Mm-hmm.
And below the house, it's you're always sitting on water.
Oh.
And it's like
Mm-hmm.
this self-sustaining thing, concreted. They dig deep down into the ground, excavation. And anytime rainwater, were to pour, it pours into, of course, a filtration system that goes into the cistern, which is something that I think now the United States is trying to replicate. But it's what I've learned growing up on it. And on that, it's like this beautiful, ginormous house, right?
Yeah.
If considering that the foundation was not built appropriately, because water tends to eat away, right? If
Mhm.
you have it sitting or moving or eroding over time. If that foundation was not built properly, there's no way that this concrete house would be able to sit
Right.
through hurricanes over time.
Right.
And that's my analogy for community and deeper understanding. If you were to have a better way of processing learned behavior, but also innate behavior, and utilizing people to build upon that, it would really create a solid form.
Right.
And I'm guessing that that's exactly how you manage to look at it from an OT perspective when you're working with the children. And I wonder, what else would you recommend for the education system to put in place that would allow for the foundation to not be eaten up by something that doesn't belong?
I think the biggest thing the education system can do is involve parents more.
Mm.
I think that's the biggest part that's missing, in my humble opinion.
What about the parent coordinators? Isn't that a piece of involvement?
There are parent coordinators, but I've seen some schools, a few schools, who it's almost annoying. They annoy their parents. Like, they robodial them. They call them to remind them 3 times that tomorrow is this event and we would like you to come. But the majority of schools may send out a memo in the child's backpack, or they may send out a calendar at the beginning of the month. And I think it comes from this attitude that, why should we spoon feed them? They should know. Like, we sent it at the beginning of the month. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, if the children are not being targeted and addressed, like, so what if you have to call the parent or set up a robot dial? Okay, we're not gonna use manpower, but set up and call them so many times. Is it gonna take anything away from you to do that? But it might help the parent to be more involved and help the student to push forward to the next step. But there's just this attitude of, like, all right, I did what I'm required to do, and that's that.
Mm.
But, like, we have parent coordinators, and allow them to do their jobs well. But I think in particular communities, we need a lot more support, and that part is not being met.
Mm.
Right? Because they're like, oh, why we have to spoon feed them? Why we have to call them 5 times like that? But say a parent is difficult, right? For whatever reason, and you do have to call little Johnny's parent 5 times. Is that Johnny's fault? Is that Johnny's fault that, like, his mom didn't respond? Like, our goal as educators is to cater to Johnny. So if Johnny's mom is a little bit difficult, okay, we have to deal with that because we're trying to reach Johnny. And I think that piece is missing. Like, they're just like, all right, I sent them the letter, I did the bare minimum, and we're moving on next. And then at the end, it's a pileup. And we're like, all right, we have this percentage of students failing and this percentage of this and that, because we don't want to, like, do the extra work at the beginning. We don't want to fix the foundation. And then the pileup always comes. When you don't fix the foundation, the pileup always comes. Sooner or later, it's coming. So I personally would rather let me try to fix it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where the education system, and in New York City, we have a new mayor, we have a new chancellor for education. So let's see. But for me personally, I understand that New York City is the largest school system in our country, and it is difficult. So whichever administration is here, there, whether they do something that causes a change or not, I'm not waiting for that.
Mm,
I'm trying to make a change with whoever's in front of me today,
right.
right? If Johnny's here today, I'm helping Johnny today, no matter what the administration or they change the policies. I'm hopeful that the policies will trickle down.
Mhm.
But I'm a bottom up person, and I believe that you build from the bottom up, not fix problems from the top down. Different people have different approaches. I'm a bottom up person, so I'm hoping for the best with this new administration, though.
I hope so too. I mean, so far, I see him everywhere, and it's interesting because last night I was just saying, to my mother, I said, "Wait a minute, did he make it to ABC News?" It's like, wait, I've not heard any other mayor make it on ABC News, evening news, but clearly Mayor Adams is making his mark. He's on CNN. He's everywhere. Pushing the New York City agenda in terms of high crime and poverty and homelessness and whatnot. And you're right. We have to wait to see what's going to be done. I'm hopeful that the education system will take a major turn in the way how they make it seem like an assembly line of producing students, just pushing them out. It almost seems like social promotion in a just given a different form. In
it,
all
it,
honesty,
and there's no accountability, and every day there's a new terminology for what
Mhm.
I call accepting less. But there's a fancy term for it, right? They want to call
It's
it,
called Common Core.
I call it lowering the bar. It's just like, come on, stop. Um, if a student is in front of me and a student does something non-desirable, I'm not going to pretend like it's desirable. I'm not going to chastise the child, but I am going to correct and teach.
Yes.
And now they want us to just like, okay, he wrote his name in fifth grade, and we're like, come on,
And given points for that.
like we're not holding these children accountable. We're not holding their parents accountable. Listen, I just think it's a whole setup to fail, but I don't know.
And this is
Like,
why we have people like you in those positions, because you care, you exercise empathy, you make sure you want to see our children really succeed, particularly children of color, because I don't think this seems to be evident in schools in other neighborhoods. I know Adonis went to school in the East Village, and the systems there, had he stayed in Brooklyn, certain, in East Flatbush, Crown Heights, Brooklyn, I don't think he would have been giving the level of attention and care as he did by going to his independent school in the East Village.
and we
Because
have to ask ourselves, why is that?
right.
Why
They
is
I mean, they literally reached out to the community was so strong, and that investment was at the forefront of math. They had bankers and all these gurus come in and mentor, these fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. You're right, racial equity. Depending on where you are. I mean, they had a connection with NYU, where the NYU tutors used to come and tell them about how to go about their work, math, science, emphasizing writing. I mean, it was just a different way of learning. And when I see how it was, say, for Carmelisha, although she had good education, there were still limited opportunities for her, because it was done, say, by creaming, if you will. If you have a particular child that just knows it by not the school's credit, because they're smart, the schools are creaming our children, so that they can meet that bar, that threshold of success or excellence. And then the other ones who have promise and potential are not being given the same level of care. So yeah, thank you for even being in the position that you're in to promote this, because I find it to be something that it's noteworthy.
Yeah, and one thing I want to share with whoever's watching is that we have to push and ask for what our children deserve.
Mhm.
We can't wait for it to be given because they're not going to give it. Because in a lot of other communities, they get it because they demand it.
Yes.
They demand it. But to demand it, you have to know what it is that you deserve, right? So to go back to what you said before about our community and communication, just like I can tell you something you didn't know, you can tell me something you didn't know. Now we both know more, right?
Mhm.
We rope in someone else and they bring a new perspective. We all know more and we keep sharing, keep sharing. And I think that is what we need to do as a community. That's it. Because, okay, a parent may have a child with an IEP. They may just trust the school, like, okay, they're doing the best for my child. They may not know, okay, there's this other service that may benefit my child. I can ask for an evaluation.
Right.
But if they don't know that this service exists, they can't ask for it. But what if
Right.
I told them that the service exists? What if another mother who happens to have the service, who happens to be at the park playing with the kid, notice something, be like, I noticed that your child does something that my child does, and I spoke to this person. This person was helpful. Let me give you the number.
Yes.
Right? That's what we need to do more. Stop just like living in our little bubbles and trying to figure it out all ourselves. Like strength, strength doesn't mean figuring it out yourself. In figuring out sometimes and reaching out whenever you need to reach out. That's strength too. You know, strength looks like different things. It comes in different packages. So there's this common thing about Black women are so strong and Black women are so strong. So, we can tolerate this, but we can be stronger if we rely on each other.
Mhm.
We reach out, we build our communities. We just need to just talk. Don't be afraid. Just ask a question. That's it. What's the worst thing that could happen? They say no. Somebody say whatever, run their mouth. At the end of the day, that doesn't take away anything from you. You
Mhm.
know? So,
You're absolutely right. Chad says, because unfortunately, I think people are afraid to be vocal. Also, we still have an old school mentality of not wanting to share information. This is very true. Very
I agree. And I know where it comes from. But if we unpack it, like, why don't we want to share?
right.
We're ashamed. Somebody might say, if we stick to the topic of children, okay, let's say you have a child. Let's say the child is on the spectrum, the child has autism, and you notice something. Okay, you don't want to share, you don't, because you don't want anyone to think, oh my gosh, you have a child with a disability. So what? So what? Whether they say it, whether they think it, you still have this child with this disability. So at the end of the day, we just have to put it aside. Like, that's that. I mean, I understand all the reasons why we have these and why it's hard, but we have to push through out of them, break out of them. You know, when I worked in Harlem, and initially when I started working in Harlem in 2003, Harlem was still primarily Black. By the time I left in 2014, it was gentrified. Starbucks was already there. H&M was already there by the time I
Yeah.
left. And my coworkers looked different by the time I left. I learned a lot from my new coworkers.
Hmm.
I I observed a lot in how they were not afraid to just come in the door and demand whatever they felt like they needed.
Right.
We need to do the same.
Indeed.
We need to do the same. We need to network. We need to build our communities. Stop being afraid of what people are going to say. People are going to talk anyway. Let them talk.
Exactly.
Let
And
them
this is
talk.
why our community boards are begging for people to be on it, people that actually can make a difference and the voice is heard, and elected officials, putting the right people in position, actually going out to vote for certain agendas and making sure that the people that are representing your communities are um, in alignment with what needs to be
Yeah.
all part of it.
People
All
say it doesn't make sense to vote. It doesn't make sense to vote, but they might run out and vote in a presidential election. If you only vote in one election, the presidential election, that's the least helpful one. Vote for, if you only choose to vote in one election, vote for the local people. That's where it starts. That's
exactly.
where it starts.
So they
Uh,
can make the changes in the education system.
right? Someone else may have a different opinion, but as I said, I'm a bottom up person. So I'm always going to start from like the bottom up. Somebody else may argue that it's better to trickle down from the top policies. Maybe we meet somewhere in the middle, but
When you trickle down from the top, as we see, it's still waiting to appear on the person's desk.
a long time, a
We'll be waiting a
long
long
time.
time. If we work from the bottom, and I believe in that approach. I even approach that way at work because I've learned how systems work from the bottom and work my way up.
Yeah.
And if you were to just go into from the top and not understand what's happening at the base, it's really difficult for you to really understand the ins and outs, particularly in running businesses or, growing places, education systems or workforce systems or whatever systems there are. It's difficult for you to really have a broader scope of what it entails if you don't know what the baseline is actually experiencing. So having to work through it, I hear you, and I'm with you with that. We're definitely here. You know,
Yeah.
what's next for you, Carla?
Oh, what's next for me? There's so many things swirling in my head at all times. And right now I'm kind of like, okay, Carla, pick one thing to focus on. I'm in the DOE. I've been here I'm going into my 8th year. I'm also an early intervention provider outside of the DOE. But as I see all the things I see, how can I help them? And it's interesting that you directly asked me what's next, because I'm asking myself that, and I'm thinking I want to pivot into being able to build stronger foundations in our community within my field, using OT as the springboard. So that's where I am. I've become lately so passionate about building building in our communities, building generational wealth, building our children up. Because if we don't, what's going to happen to me when I'm like old? What am I going to have? Who's going to be around me? You know. I'm always like telling someone about investing. I'm always like telling someone about real estate. I'm always sharing any bits of information. So I just kind of want to maybe packages it and put it in one place so communities can access it. So that's what I'm working on, being able to have something where I can help my community build in whatever area that is helpful for them. So,
It sounds like there's a lot of promise there. And, knowing you personally, I know that you're one that truly supports. I appreciate the support that you've given me over the years, with Aria. You pop in and pop out, but when you pop out strong, man. Then I really appreciate all the support during the mask making or even the love offerings when I was pregnant with Aria. I mean, you've always managed to just stay in touch. And I
we were
really
pregnancy
appreciate,
buddies. We
right?
were pregnancy buddies.
Right, we were. And I just appreciate you taking the time today and giving a broader perspective on what's really happening and what's important for our children to thrive. I'm grateful.
I thank you for having me. And I want to extend this to anyone who's watching. My link is on Shamara's page. If anyone has a question that I may be able to help them with for a child or a student in education, feel free. You can send me a message and I'll try my best to answer it or to refer you to someone who could answer it for you. So I'll just
Awesome.
extend that.
Oh, please.
So
That would be so helpful. And I'll be sure to share your handle in case anyone has any questions, because I know in
yeah,
the school system, and for parents, it's difficult to navigate. And again, just having someone to confide in about what's happening, truly happening, it would be helpful to have that sounding board. And I appreciate you extending that to
yeah,
our
no
viewers.
problem. Thank you so much. It's such a great time being here with you.
Oh man, this was fun. I mean, it was serious business, but it was
Right?
fun. I knew this was going to be like one of those cute moments because, oh my gosh, it's Carla.
I just think that's like the joy of us as Black people. Like we could break down serious business, but still make it so much fun. I think that's just how we are.
That's because the future is female.
That's right. Shamara, let's mention to them. I'll share this quick story.
Right. It's interesting to the viewers. Carla said to me, she says, "How did you know that I had the strength tattooed on my wrist? I honestly did not know." And entitling this program today "Signs of Strength," it just made sense. I'm intuitive, and when I put out, because everyone that comes on here, they never know what the topic is going to be. I send it a few days before, and they're like, "Okay," and it turns out that the discussion really it hones on exactly what it is. And you talked about strength in such a powerful way today, in making sure that we navigate that. I am just appreciative. Thank you so much. for being here, and for everyone tuning in. I really appreciate the feedback, the questions, the comments. You guys are just so wonderful. I truly, truly hold you dear in my heart. And for tuning in every week, for everyone out there, have a purpose filled Saturday. Thank you, Carla.
Be blessed, everyone. Bye.